Gary Hoy was known for his sharp legal mind and his sense of humor, but inside Toronto's Holden Day Wilson law firm, he was also famous for one unusual party trick. On July 9, 1993, the firm welcomed a new group of articling students on the 24th floor of the Toronto Dominion Centre. During the tour, Hoy decided to demonstrate what he claimed was the unbreakable strength of the office windows. He had done it before, more times than anyone could remember. Each time, he would take a running start, hurl himself into the glass, and bounce back, leaving the pane intact and his audience stunned. That afternoon, Hoy performed the stunt for the students. The first impact went as expected. The tempered glass flexed, but did not break. Laughter and applause followed. Then, with the group still watching, he tried it again. This time, the glass did not shatter. Instead, the entire window assembly, pane, frame, and all, popped free from its mounting. Hoy and the window plunged 24 stories to the courtyard below. He was killed instantly. The investigation that followed revealed a critical misunderstanding. The glass itself was structurally sound, manufactured to withstand hurricane-force winds and accidental bumps. But the building's curtain wall system, designed in the 1960s, relied on a network of aluminum frames, gaskets, and anchors to hold the panes in place. These systems were built to resist wind pressure distributed across the entire surface, not the sudden, concentrated force of a grown man's body. Over the years, repeated impacts may have loosened the frame or weakened the anchors. When Hoy hit the window that final time, the system failed, not because the glass was weak, but because the frame was never meant to take that kind of load. Engineers brought in after the accident confirmed what the building code had always assumed. No office window is designed to withstand a person throwing themselves against it. The code required windows to resist wind loads and minor impacts, not deliberate, repeated collisions. The tempered glass, 4 to 5 times stronger than ordinary panes, did exactly what it was supposed to do. It stayed intact, even as it fell. The failure happened in the connections, the invisible hardware that holds everything together. Hoy's death became a textbook example in engineering and safety courses, cited by structural experts as a warning about the limits of materials and the hazards of unchecked assumptions. The story spread quickly, picked up by news outlets and legal journals alike. It was not the glass that failed, but the belief that strength in one part of a system guaranteed safety overall. In the aftermath, the law firm struggled to recover, facing both the shock of Hoy's loss and the relentless public attention. Within 3 years, Holden Day Wilson closed its doors for good. The lesson left behind was simple, but essential. Systems fail in ways that are not always obvious. What looks unbreakable might still be vulnerable at the edges, where the unseen parts do their silent work. Trusting a single component, no matter how strong, without understanding the whole can have consequences that no one expects. When safety depends on the sum of its parts, confidence without caution is a risk that cannot be taken back. Kyle Thompson was 22, a former team captain at Iowa State, and known for his steady, encouraging presence in the gym. On a December morning in 2016, he arrived at Elite Edge in Ankeny, Iowa, ready to push himself as he had countless times before. The session called for a heavy bench press. 315 pounds, a weight that demands respect even from seasoned lifters. He set up with spotters on hand, following the standard safety playbook. Mark Yonts, the gym's spokesman, later confirmed that Kyle wasn't lifting alone. The spotters stood ready, eyes fixed on the bar, prepared to help if his strength faded. Everything about the setup suggested experience and caution. The bar was loaded, collars secured, and the group exchanged the usual nods before Kyle lay back on the bench. He gripped the bar, unracked it, and lowered it to his chest. On the press, something went wrong. His grip slipped. In an instant, The 315-pound bar dropped, landing across his neck. The spotters reacted, but the speed and force of the fall outpaced even the best intentions. Ankeny Fire Chief James Clack later explained that the crushing weight caused injuries too severe to survive. Emergency crews arrived quickly, and Kyle was rushed to a Des Moines hospital, but doctors could not reverse the damage. Investigators combed through the details. There was no sign of negligence, no faulty equipment, no missed step in the gym's procedures. The bar simply slipped, and gravity did the rest. The presence of spotters, a rule followed to the letter, couldn't overcome the physics at play. The force of a free-falling 315-pound bar is beyond what any person can arrest in a split second. Kyle's death rippled through the Iowa State community and the gym world at large. Coaches and friends described him as a gentle leader, the kind of person who made others better just by showing up. His high school coach, Greg Schoon, told local reporters, "He was lifting weights, something I did with him 1,000 times. It's tough to understand, or why, or what happened." Memorial posts filled the gym's social media, and grief counselors supported those struggling to process the loss. The lesson from Kyle's story is clear. Spotters are essential, but they have limits. When a bar slips or a lifter's grip fails, the time to react can be measured in fractions of a second. Even the strongest, most attentive spotter can't always outpace gravity. For anyone pressing heavy mechanical safety stops, pins, arms, or straps are the last line of defense. Human help matters, but physics doesn't wait. Kyle's story is a sobering reminder. In the gym, build in every layer of safety you can, and never rely on hands alone to catch what the body can't hold. Brijesh Yadav was 17 years old and already a national-level gymnast in India. On October 11, 2016, he walked into his gym in Agra, focused on perfecting the double front tuck, a tumbling skill that demands a rapid, tucked rotation forward, twice, before landing feet first. He had landed this move successfully 4 times that day. On the 5th attempt, something went wrong. As he launched into the air, witnesses said he lost his balance mid-rotation. Instead of landing on his feet, his body pitched forward, and his neck took the full impact on the mat. The gym fell silent. Brijesh could not move. His coach, Arvind Yadav, called for help. Brijesh was rushed to a local hospital, paralyzed below the neck. The next day, he was transferred to Paras Hospital in Gurgaon, over 200 kilometers away, where Dr. Arun Bhanot took over his care. The medical team found that Brijesh's injury had damaged the upper spinal cord and the respiratory centers that control breathing. He was placed on a ventilator immediately. Dr. Bhanot later explained that in cases like this, 80% of patients do not survive the initial trauma. Brijesh made it through the first night, but his condition remained critical. Over the next several weeks, he underwent 2 complex surgeries. The operations stabilized his spine, but his body could not recover independent breathing. Infections set in, a common risk for patients on long-term ventilator support. Despite every intervention, Brijesh never regained movement or the ability to breathe on his own. After nearly 50 days in intensive care, he died in early December 2016. His accident drew attention not only because of the skill involved, but because of the setting. The gym in Agra lacked the advanced infrastructure seen in elite training centers abroad. The matting was described as soft, but there were questions about its thickness and placement. Indian media and former coaches pointed to a wider problem. The sport's rapid growth in India had not been matched by improvements in safety equipment, medical readiness, or coaching protocols. Retired coach Gurvinder Singh argued that Brijesh should not have been cleared to attempt the full double front tuck unless every step of his technique was flawless. The expertise paradox was clear. Brijesh was skilled and experienced, but one mistimed takeoff proved fatal. The medical struggle that followed only underscored the limits of emergency response in Indian sports. Brijesh survived longer than most with his type of injury, but the outcome was the same. His case became a rallying point for calls to upgrade gymnastics infrastructure, ensure better training for coaches, and place greater emphasis on emergency medical planning in every gym. In the weeks after his death, Indian newspapers published editorials questioning whether the country's new generation of aspiring gymnasts could be kept safe as the sport continued to grow. Jimmy Heselden set out that morning with his dog, steering his Segway X2 along a narrow path above the river wharf. The limestone cliffs at Jackdaw Crag dropped 42 feet to the water below, a favorite spot for locals, but never forgiving. The Segway beneath him wasn't a showroom model. It was the off-road variant, designed for rough ground, with wide tires gripping the uneven earth. At 62, Heselden had built his fortune on battlefield barriers and had recently purchased Segway Incorporated. Now, the path wound close to the cliff, hemmed in by trees, and the edge just 1.5 meters away. Sean Christie, out walking his own dog, approached from the opposite direction. The path narrowed further where they met. Christie later told the coroner he saw Heselden pause, sizing up the incline and the space between them. Instead of waiting for Christie to squeeze by, Heselden attempted a polite maneuver. He eased the Segway backwards to give more room. As he reversed, the machine wobbled. The controls that made the Segway so intuitive on open ground demanded precision here. Any miscalculation, any tilt, and the balancing system couldn't compensate. The wheels edged too close to the drop. In a split second, Heselden and the Segway tumbled over the cliff, falling 42 feet into the river below. The first person to reach the water was Christie. He found Heselden face down, unresponsive, the Segway nearby. Emergency services arrived, but there was nothing to be done. The inquest at Leeds Coroner's Court drew on Christie's account and forensic evidence from the scene. Coroner David Hinchliffe described Heselden's final act as an act of courtesy, a gesture entirely in character, according to friends and family. The coroner's verdict was accidental death. Examination of the Segway found no mechanical fault. The device's electronics and balance systems were intact. The cliff, the path, and the split-second decision had done what no machine failure could. In the days that followed, tributes poured in for Heselden's philanthropy and business legacy. The British press focused on the bitter irony. A man who had championed new technology brought down not by the machine, but by terrain, and a moment of courtesy. Safety experts pointed to the environment: a narrow, uneven path, a sudden need to maneuver, and a drop that left no margin for error. The Segway's stability system, designed for city streets and park trails, could not account for the unpredictability of nature. Familiar technology met unfamiliar ground, and the outcome was irreversible. Heselden's death became a lesson in the limits of even the most advanced devices. Skill, experience, and confidence can all be undone by a single misjudgment when the environment changes. The coroner's words, an act of courtesy, remained as a reminder that sometimes the smallest decisions, made in the spirit of kindness, can carry unforeseen consequences. When technology and terrain collide, it is the landscape that often sets the final terms. The safest path is not always the one that feels most familiar. Always know the ground beneath your wheels. Franz Reichelt arrived at the base of the Eiffel Tower before sunrise, clutching a bundle that would decide his fate. The date was February 4th, 1912. He wore his invention, a bulky suit of canvas and silk, reinforced with rods and straps, meant to unfold in free fall and deliver him safely to the ground. The police had granted permission to test a parachute from the first platform, 57 meters above the Champ de Mars, but only with a dummy. Reichelt ignored the terms. He declared, in front of 30 journalists and onlookers, that he would make the jump himself. Friends pleaded with him to reconsider, pointing out the wind and the untested suit. Even a security guard tried to block his way, worried by the memory of previous dummy drops that had ended in disaster. Reichelt's confidence was absolute. He told reporters, "You are going to see how my 72 kilos and my parachute will give your arguments the most decisive of denials." He climbed the iron steps, suit rustling with every movement, and paused on the first platform. The newsreel cameras rolled, capturing every moment. He hesitated for less than a minute, then stepped onto a stool placed near the guardrail. Without a rope, backup, or test run, he steadied himself, faced the Seine, and jumped. The parachute suit opened for an instant, then collapsed around his body. Instead of slowing, he plummeted straight down. The impact was immediate and fatal. In the aftermath, the crowd fell silent. Police and journalists rushed to the scene. The suit, crushed and tangled, offered no answers. The newsreel footage spread rapidly across Europe, replayed in cinemas, and dissected in newspapers. Le Petit Parisien called it a reckless experiment. The authorities insisted they had never authorized a live test. Aviation experts pointed out that no parachute could have deployed in time from such a height, especially in a suit so heavy and unproven. Within days, Reichelt's name became shorthand for the dangers of unchecked ambition. The Aero Club de France's prize for a successful parachute remained unclaimed. Pilots and inventors debated the line between courage and folly. In the years that followed, safer parachute designs emerged, but only after countless controlled trials, rigorous dummy drops, and a new respect for the laws of physics. Reichelt's death became a warning. Innovation demands patience, evidence, and humility. Trusting untested ideas with your life is not bravery. It is a refusal to listen to the world's most unforgiving teacher, gravity. Justin Vicky was 33, a trainer and fitness influencer with more than 30,000 followers. He built his reputation in Bali, not just for his physique, but for his patient coaching and the way he encouraged clients to push past fear. Always, he said, with safety in mind. On July 15, 2023, he walked into Paradise Bali Gym for another training session. The plan was a back squat, a staple in his routine, but this time the bar was loaded with 210 kilograms, over 450 pounds. The gym was busy, music echoing off the walls. Cameras were rolling. Justin set up under the bar, one spotter standing close behind. He ducked beneath the steel, braced it across his shoulders, and stepped back. The spotter hovered, hands ready. There were no safety pins set in the rack, no straps or arms to catch the bar if things went wrong. Justin inhaled, dropped into the squat, and drove upward. Midway through the ascent, his strength faltered. Muscles in his legs began to twitch, a sign, later noted by powerlifting experts, that the body was reaching its absolute limit. The bar rolled forward, shifting from his back toward his neck. The spotter tried to help, but with 210 kilograms in motion, there was nothing a single person could do. The bar crashed down, pinning Justin's head and neck. He lost consciousness immediately. Staff rushed to his side. Paramedics arrived, and he was taken to the hospital for emergency surgery. Surgeons worked to relieve the pressure on nerves controlling his heart and lungs. Justin never woke up. He died the next day, surrounded by family. Paradise Bali Gym posted a tribute, describing him as more than a trainer, someone who made people feel safe, who believed in their potential, who created a space where clients could test their limits and find confidence. Social media filled with messages from clients and friends, many recalling his gentle encouragement and his emphasis on training smart. In the days that followed, fitness professionals around the world dissected the footage. One detail stood out: the absence of hard safeties. At this weight, even the strongest spotter is powerless against gravity. The only thing that can reliably stop a bar in freefall is a mechanical barrier. Pins, straps, or arms set at the right height. Justin knew the theory, but in the moment, with the cameras rolling and the lift in progress, the backup wasn't there. His story is a warning for anyone who lifts heavy. Experience and good intentions aren't enough. When the load is near your max, human help alone can't guarantee your safety. The only real protection is a mechanical one, set before the first rep. Justin's legacy is more than his strength or his following. It's a reminder that in the gym, the smallest oversight can have consequences no one can reverse. Michelle Maitland returned to gymnastics in April 2009, 7 years after leaving the sport as a child. At 19, she joined an adults class at Gymnastics Townsville, advertised as non-competitive and focused on fitness. Maitland had once been a level 6 gymnast, but her body had changed since her early training. She was now taller, heavier, and her center of gravity had shifted. On June 18, 2009, she was working through skills on the tumble track, a long, springy trampoline strip designed for tumbling practice. The tumble track is supposed to provide a forgiving surface for practicing jumps and flips, with a dismount mat at the end to absorb landings. That evening, the mat at the end measured 3.6 meters long, but beyond it, the exposed concrete floor was left unprotected. A floating safety mat, meant to cover this runoff zone, had been moved earlier in the night by another group and not replaced. Witnesses described Maitland taking her turn on the tumble track. She gained speed, launched into her final skill, and landed at the very edge of the dismount mat. The force carried her past the mat's end. She struck her head on the bare concrete. There was no second line of defense, no extra padding, no perimeter protection. The impact caused a catastrophic head injury. The coach, Robert Crane, heard the sound and turned to see Maitland lying motionless. Emergency services were called. Maitland was transported to Townsville Hospital, but the injury was beyond treatment. She died the next day, June 19, 2009. The Queensland coroner's inquest began in 2011 and delivered its findings in April 2013. The investigation focused on the gym's safety setup and supervision that night. The coroner found that the floating mat, which should have covered the concrete beyond the primary mat, had been moved for use at the vault and not returned. Testimony showed that mats were often shifted around the gym as needed, with no fixed requirement for continuous coverage at high-risk zones. The 3.6-meter mat was standard, but not enough to guarantee protection for adult gymnasts with increased power and momentum. The coroner concluded that Maitland's changed body shape, weight, and center of gravity after puberty increased her risk of overshooting the mat, something not accounted for in the gym's risk assessment. The inquest also examined supervision. The coach in charge was not watching Maitland's run. Another participant confirmed that the coach only turned after hearing the impact. There was no immediate spotting or intervention. Toxicology reports indicated the presence of cannabis in Maitland's system, which the coroner said could have impaired her coordination and judgment to an unquantifiable degree, but was not the primary cause of the accident. As a result of Maitland's death, Workplace Health and Safety Queensland issued a prohibition notice, halting use of the tumble track until a full risk assessment was completed. Permanent matting was later installed to cover all runoff zones, ensuring that no athlete could reach unprotected concrete. The coroner's recommendations called for fixed perimeter protection and strict protocols for mat placement, especially in mixed-age or adult classes where physical profiles vary widely. Maitland's case exposed a critical flaw. The system assumed existing mats and supervision were enough, but a single missing piece left a fatal gap. Her story became a case study in why every edge, every landing zone, and every transition between apparatus and floor must be treated as a potential hazard, because the margin for error can be no more than the width of a mat. Chris Fordham was 23 years old and ranked among Britain's best in double mini trampoline, or DMT, a discipline where gymnasts sprint, leap onto a small trampoline, execute aerial skills, and land on a crash mat. On February 18, 2006, Fordham entered the Jumpers Rebound Center in Gillingham for a training session. The facility was considered one of the most advanced in the country, with equipment and crash mats meeting the strictest standards set by British Gymnastics and the International Gymnastics Federation. The landing area measured 6 meters by 3 meters, the prescribed size for elite-level DMT landings. The safety zone was clear, the mats in position, and the apparatus inspected. Fordham was preparing for the European Championships. He had performed his routine safely hundreds of times before. That afternoon, he completed his warm-up, then began a round of full-power passes. On his third attempt, he launched into the dismount. Witnesses described a powerful takeoff, but something in his trajectory was off. Instead of coming down on the mat, he traveled beyond its edge, 2 full meters past the landing zone, striking the floor with his back and head. The impact was catastrophic. Coaches and staff rushed to his side. Paramedics stabilized him and transferred him to the hospital. Fordham was placed on life support, but scans revealed severe, irreversible brain damage. 9 days later, on February 27, 2006, his family made the decision to withdraw life support. He died that same day. At the inquest, Coach Nick Earle, with 25 years' experience, testified that he had never seen an athlete overshoot the landing zone so completely. The coroner, Roger Sykes, reviewed the facility's compliance, crash mats at regulation size and thickness, apparatus maintained, all standards met. Sykes concluded, Chris was an experienced and top-ranking international gymnast, but what he did was inexplicable and never seen before. The equipment was not at fault, and I'm satisfied this was a tragic accident. Fordham's accident forced a closer look at the limits of safety calculations for high-powered skills. The landing area, designed for the vast majority of cases, was not enough to contain the rare outlier, an athlete generating far more horizontal travel than expected. Even in a modern facility, with every box checked, the margin for error proved finite. The British Gymnastics chief executive called it a rare but tragic accident, emphasizing that even the safest environment cannot remove all risk when athletes push the boundaries of what is physically possible. Today, the DMT landing zone remains one of the most carefully measured spaces in the sport. Fordham's death is a reminder that for every routine that ends within the lines, there are scenarios, rare, unpredictable, where the athlete's speed and power exceed the system's limits. The question of how large a landing zone needs to be, and how to anticipate the unexpected, continues to shape safety discussions in gymnastics worldwide. Jordan Bond was 15 years old, a rising talent from Ohio, and one of dozens of athletes competing at the John McCready Flip Fest in Knoxville. On January 17, 2004, the Knoxville Convention Center was transformed into a maze of trampolines and competition floors. The 15-16 Junior Elite Trampoline event drew a crowd of families and coaches, the air thick with anticipation and the sharp scent of chalk. The apparatus bone-faced was standard for the meet, a competition trampoline surrounded by blue safety mats, with a perimeter set by temporary barriers and concrete floors beyond. Bone's routine began like so many before it. He mounted the trampoline, executed his opening skills, and prepared for the final series. Witnesses recall a strong takeoff, higher than usual. In a split second, his momentum carried him off course. He lost control mid-air. Instead of landing back on the trampoline bed or the immediate safety mats, Bond was propelled past the edge of the apparatus. He struck his head on the concrete floor just beyond the matting. The impact was immediate and devastating. Coaches and event staff rushed to his side. Emergency medical technicians stationed at the venue responded within moments. Bone was stabilized and transported to the University of Tennessee Medical Center, where he was admitted in critical condition. Over the next 2 days, he remained in intensive care, but the trauma to his brain proved fatal. On January 19, 2004, Jordan Bone died from his injuries. The accident's specifics were scrutinized in the aftermath. Reports confirmed the trampoline and mats were set up according to competition guidelines. The event perimeter, however, left a narrow margin between the apparatus and the exposed concrete. The force of Bone's bounce, combined with his trajectory, breached that margin, turning a calculated risk into an unthinkable loss. The timeline of those 3 days, routine, accident, emergency response, and hospital vigil, revealed how quickly a controlled environment can turn perilous when the limits of safety zones are tested. In 2006, a federal judge issued a ruling that would ripple through the gymnastics world for years. The case centered on a fatal accident at a sanctioned event, where every safety protocol had been followed, except for one detail, buried in the margins. The court examined not just the actions of coaches or athletes, but the underlying structure of liability in American gymnastics. At issue was the legal weight of participant waivers and the adequacy of perimeter padding around high-risk apparatus. The judge found that while waivers might limit claims against organizers, they could not erase the duty to maintain a safe environment. The ruling pointed directly at the exposed concrete bordering the competition floor, a hazard that had been overlooked in event planning, despite adherence to national guidelines. USA Gymnastics responded by issuing new directives on event setup. Facilities were instructed to extend padding beyond the minimum apparatus footprint, covering every possible runoff zone with crash mats or equivalent protection. The ruling forced a reckoning with the idea that compliance alone was not enough. The real test was whether every foreseeable risk had been addressed. Legal analysts summarized the decision in Sports Litigation Alert, noting that the precedent would influence not only gymnastics, but all youth sports where high-velocity landings are routine. The aftermath was felt at every level of the sport. Event directors began re-examining venue layouts, insurance carriers updated their policy requirements, and coaches received new training on hazard identification. The federal court's decision made clear that the responsibility for safety extended beyond the written rulebook. It was now a matter of anticipating the unpredictable and building a system where the next fatal gap would not be left exposed. Jennifer Strange arrived at KDND 107.9's Sacramento studio before sunrise, ready to compete for a Nintendo Wii. The contest rules were simple but unforgiving. Drink as much water as you can, do not urinate, and outlast the others. The first round started with 8-ounce bottles every 15 minutes. 18 contestants lined up, each nervously eyeing the clear plastic bottles stacked behind the glass. Strange, a 28-year-old mother of 3, kept pace as the hours ticked by. The DJS joked about bladders bursting and played pop songs between updates. Early on, a listener called in, a nurse. She warned Live on Air that water intoxication could kill. The hosts laughed it off. They said, "Yeah, we are aware of that," and they signed releases, so we are not responsible. After 8 rounds, the rules changed. Now it was half-liter bottles every 10 minutes. The pace doubled. Contestants began to drop out, some vomiting, others clutching their stomachs. Strange kept going. Her voice, caught on the broadcast, sounded strained. "My head hurts." One DJ remarked she looked pregnant, her belly swollen with water. She forced a smile, but her hands shook. Another call came in, again warning of the dangers. The staff brushed it aside. "It is just water," one said. "Your body is 98% water." By hour 3, Strange had consumed nearly 2 gallons, over 7 liters. Her speech slowed. She complained of lightheadedness and pain. The hosts, still joking, asked if she was okay. She replied, "It hurts." The contest ended for her soon after. She accepted concert tickets as a consolation prize and left the studio, visibly unwell. No medical staff checked on her. The show moved on, but the damage was already done. Acute hyponatremia had begun its silent work. No one at the station called her family, and no one called for help. The line between entertainment and safety, already blurred, vanished completely. What started as a harmless stunt became a race against the body's own limits, a race no one at the station understood, and no one was prepared to stop. The legal consequences of Jennifer Strange's death arrived with the full force of California's civil courts. The wrongful death lawsuit, filed by her family in Sacramento County Superior Court, laid out a case built on the contest's design, the warnings ignored, and the absence of any medical oversight. Over 2 weeks in September 2009, jurors heard testimony from medical experts, former contestants, and the radio staff themselves. The jury listened to the broadcast tapes, callers warning about water intoxication, DJs laughing it off, the moment Strange complained her head hurt. The evidence was stark. The contest rules had changed midstream, increasing the water volume. No one on staff had checked with a doctor, and the signed waivers never mentioned the risk of death. On October 29th, the verdict came down. The jury found Entercom Sacramento, the parent company of KDND, entirely responsible. No fault assigned to Strange herself. The damages, $16.577 million, awarded to her husband and 3 children. It was one of the largest wrongful death awards in county history. Jurors cited the station's disregard for repeated warnings and the decision to escalate the contest despite visible distress among participants. In interviews, several jurors said they were struck by the callousness captured on the tapes, the jokes, the dismissals, the insistence that waivers were enough. The message was clear: entertainment does not excuse reckless endangerment. The fallout did not stop at civil court. The Federal Communications Commission opened an inquiry into whether KDND had violated its duty to serve the public interest. The FCC's order for a license renewal hearing, issued in 2016, cited 7 major failures, from the dangerous contest design to the lack of medical oversight, and the station's failure to warn contestants about the risks. Rather than face a public hearing that could threaten its entire business, Entercom surrendered KDND's license in 2017. The station went dark, its frequency auctioned off, its brand erased from the Sacramento airwaves. 10 staff members lost their jobs. The company's merger with CBS Radio moved forward, but the stain remained. The consequences reached beyond one family's loss. The verdict and the FCC's action became a warning for the entire industry. Waivers and ratings do not erase the duty of care. The Strange case is now taught in media law, cited in safety training, and referenced in new contest guidelines. It stands as a reminder that institutions, not just individuals, are accountable for the risks they create. When the pursuit of entertainment crosses into recklessness, the law draws a hard line. The lesson is simple: protect those in your care, or be prepared to answer for the consequences. Ben Shaw was 15, a rugby player with a reputation for kindness and a future that seemed wide open. After school on September 26, 2017, he walked into the Pine Rivers PCYC gym in Brisbane, ready for a solo workout. The gym, usually bustling with young athletes, was quiet that afternoon. Ben set himself up at the bench press, loading the bar to approximately 98 kilograms, a heavy weight, but not unheard of for a determined teenager with big athletic goals. He lay back, gripped the bar, and pressed. No one watched. The gym's policy required under-16s to be supervised at all times, but Ben was alone. Somewhere in the lift, his strength gave out, or his balance shifted. The bar dropped, pinning him across the neck. There was no spotter, no safety bars, no one to notice the silent struggle. Minutes ticked by. Some reports say it was 20, others more than 30. The exact number is lost, but what's certain is that the time without help sealed his fate. A staff member or another gym-goer finally entered and saw him on the bench, motionless, the bar pressing down. They rushed to pull the weight away and called for help. CPR began as soon as the bar was lifted, and paramedics arrived quickly. Ben was taken to Lady Silento Children's Hospital and placed on life support, but the damage from those long minutes without oxygen was too great. 4 days later, his family gathered in the hospital as he died. The aftermath reached far beyond the gym walls. Queensland's workplace health and safety investigators shut the facility and launched a probe. Their findings were damning. The gym's own rules demanded supervision for anyone under 16, yet Ben had been left on his own. The PCYC organization faced prosecution under the Work Health and Safety Act for failing to protect him, a Category 2 offense, one step below the most serious possible charge. The case became national news, sparking debate about youth safety in gyms and the real-world meaning of duty of care. Ben's family made a decision that defined his legacy. They donated his organs and tissues, saving and changing the lives of others. Community tributes poured in, nearly 200 messages from teammates, coaches, and strangers who saw themselves in a boy chasing strength and self-improvement. His rugby club posted that Ben, even in death, had given others a chance at life. The lesson from Ben Shaw's story is stark. The weight that pinned him wasn't extraordinary. What made it fatal was time, minutes alone, with no one to help, no backup plan, and no margin for error. For young athletes and gym operators everywhere, his story stands as a warning. Even ordinary loads can become deadly if you're trapped and unseen. In the gym, safety isn't just about how much you can lift, but about never having to fight for your life in silence. Melanie Coleman was 20 years old, a junior at Southern Connecticut State University, and a recognized All-America Scholar athlete. On November 8, 2019, she entered New Era Gymnastics in Hamden, Connecticut, for what should have been a routine evening practice. Coleman was not attempting a new skill or pushing for a harder routine. She was working through standard uneven bars drills, the kind she had performed countless times before. The gym was quiet, except for the familiar sounds of chalk, springs, and the low voices of teammates and coaches. At some point during her session, Coleman lost her grip or footing. Witnesses later described it as a sudden, ordinary fall. She struck the matting below, but the angle and force drove catastrophic trauma to her head and neck. The injury was immediate and severe. Paramedics responded within minutes, transporting her to Yale New Haven Hospital, one of the state's top trauma centers. She spent nearly 2 days in intensive care, surrounded by family and teammates, before dying from her injuries on November 10th. Connecticut's chief medical examiner, Dr. James Gill, ruled the cause as blunt injuries to the head and neck. The manner was accidental. Coleman's coaches and university officials emphasized her experience and discipline. She was not known for risky behavior or carelessness in the gym. Her accident happened in a controlled setting, under supervision, with established safety protocols in place. There was no experimental skill, no equipment malfunction, no warning that the next repetition would be different from any before it. The routine nature of the drill became the most unsettling detail. In the days that followed, shock turned into questions. How could a well-trained gymnast practicing a standard skill suffer a fatal accident in a modern, regulated facility? The NCAA and gymnastics community began to scrutinize the exact matting configuration around the uneven bars, the thickness and placement of landing mats, and the presence or absence of spotters for even routine skills. The specifics of Coleman's fall were not detailed in public reports. But the focus on routine exercise led to renewed debate about whether current matting standards offered enough protection, especially at the margins of the apparatus. University statements described Coleman as a role model, a student who balanced academic achievement with athletic excellence. Her death was not only a loss to her team, but a chilling reminder that even the most familiar routines in gymnastics carry unforgiving risks. In the aftermath, discussions about NCAA safety protocols intensified, with particular attention to how matting and spotting could be improved, even for skills that had always been considered safe. The memory of a promising athlete, lost during a simple drill, now hangs over every conversation about safety in collegiate gymnastics. David Grundman and his roommate drove out past Lake Pleasant on February 4, 1982, loaded with rifles and a shotgun. Their plan was simple: shoot at the giant saguaros that dotted the Sonoran Desert, a practice locals called cactus plugging. Grundman started with a 10-foot cactus, blasting it until it split and crashed to the ground. He laughed, called it easy, and turned his attention to a much older target, a saguaro standing nearly 27 feet tall, its arms twisted skyward, a century of slow growth baked into its flesh. He fired from less than 10 feet away, sending buckshot into the trunk. The saguaro's thick green skin and woody ribs absorbed the first hits, but the next blast shattered the balance. One of the arms, about 4 feet long and weighing roughly 500 pounds, broke loose and fell. Grundman had just enough time to yell before the arm struck him, pinning him in place. Then the main trunk, weakened by the gunfire, toppled as well. The combined weight crushed him instantly. James Sukochi, Grundman's roommate, watched the scene unfold in disbelief. He ran to help, but there was nothing to be done. Grundman's body was trapped beneath the fallen saguaro, a plant that had likely started growing before Arizona was a state. The remote site delayed emergency response, but the outcome was clear from the start. The Maricopa County medical examiner ruled the death accidental, instantaneous, unavoidable once the cactus began to fall. News of the incident spread quickly across Arizona. Grundman's story became a fixture in local media, a warning passed from generation to generation. The details grew sharper with each retelling: the saguaro's age, the weight of the falling arm, the distance of the shot. Environmental groups and park rangers pointed to the case as a stark example of why saguaros are protected by state law. Cutting, damaging, or removing a saguaro without a permit is a felony in Arizona, punishable by jail time and heavy fines. The law exists not just to preserve the landscape, but to protect people from the dangers of underestimating the desert's silent giants. The saguaro is more than a symbol of the Southwest. It is an ecosystem in itself, sheltering birds, storing water, and standing firm through storms and droughts. Its arms can weigh hundreds of pounds, its trunk several tons. When a saguaro falls, the force is absolute. Grundman's fate is now a cautionary tale in classrooms and ranger talks, a reminder that nature's patience is matched only by its power. Taunting the desert for sport is not control, but invitation. Mass, gravity, and the law each have their say. The lesson endures: the wild is not a stage for bravado, and the cost of ignoring its rules is both immediate and final. In 2007, a jury awarded $16.5 million to Jennifer Strange's family after a radio stunt ignored repeated warnings and ended in her death. Yashtika Acharya was 17, but her accomplishments read like those of an athlete twice her age. She was a junior national games gold medalist, a national champion, and the pride of her family in Bikaner, Rajasthan. Her goal for 2025 was both audacious and simple: squat 300 kilograms, nearly 4 times her own body weight, before her 18th birthday. On February 18th, she walked into Power Headquarters gym with her coach, focused on the next milestone, a 270-kilogram squat, a weight that would challenge even the most seasoned lifters. The gym itself was new, its racks and bars barely worn, but Yashtika's routine was anything but casual. This was a training attempt, not a competition, but every detail mattered. Plates were checked, collars tightened, her coach standing close behind. She ducked under the bar, settled it across her shoulders, and braced. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. Yashtika lifted the bar from the rack. As she stepped back, her foot caught, balance wavered, and the full force of 270 kilograms shifted. In a split second, the bar rolled forward, crashing down onto her neck. Her coach lunged, hands outstretched, but the weight was already past the point of recovery. The impact was immediate and catastrophic. By the time gym members rushed to help, Yashtika was unresponsive. CPR started right away, and she was rushed to the hospital, but the trauma to her cervical spine left no chance. Doctors pronounced her dead on arrival. Police confirmed the sequence: a failed lift, a broken neck, and a trainer left with minor injuries from the scramble to help. The post-mortem was clear. The weight had done what no human body could survive. Her family, notified that evening, chose not to file a complaint. The gym, open only a few months, closed its doors for days as the community tried to process what had happened to a girl they'd seen chasing records week after week. News of Yashtika's death traveled fast. Headlines in the Hindustan Times, Indian Express, and Times of India told of a prodigy lost. Social media filled with tributes, photos from her championship in Goa, stories from teammates, promises from coaches to never let her drive for greatness be forgotten. In Bikaner, her sisters, one of them a powerlifter too, faced the loss of both a role model and a friend. The Powerlifting Federation released statements urging renewed focus on safety, but for those who knew her, words felt hollow. In the days that followed, experts dissected the footage and the facts. Yashtika had not been alone. Her coach was present, experienced, and alert. But at 270 kilograms, even two adults cannot reverse physics in a moment of instability. The safety arms on the squat rack were set for the lift, but she stepped back just far enough that they offered no protection when the bar slipped. The lesson echoed through gyms across India. With extreme loads, the margin for error vanishes. No reputation, medal, or coaching experience can substitute for mechanical safeguards set exactly right. When a lifter is handling nearly 600 pounds, a single misstep can be the difference between a personal best and catastrophe. Yashtika's story is now part of the unspoken education for every young athlete chasing records. Her legacy is more than medals. It's a warning. Elite promise does not cancel risk. At the very edge of human strength, even the smallest lapse in control leaves the body utterly exposed. For coaches and lifters alike, her final lift is a call to respect the limits of flesh and bone, and to remember that, in the pursuit of greatness, safety is never optional. Mohammad Faraj was known for his discipline, both in the classroom and in the gym. On October 16, 2024, he walked into UEA Sports Park, ready for a session that would start like any other. His plan was simple: calf raises on the Smith machine, a movement he had done before. He set the bar with two 25-kilogram plates, plus the 15-kilogram bar itself, 65 kilograms in total. To get a deeper stretch, he placed an aerobic step beneath his feet, raising himself above the floor. The Smith machine, with its built-in safety stops, should have been a safeguard, but those stops had been left at their lowest setting by the previous user, who had needed them out of the way for hip thrusts. There were no warnings, no reminders to check or reset them. Mohammed didn't adjust the stops. He stepped up, positioned the bar across his shoulders, and began his set. As he lifted, The plastic step wobbled beneath him. The surface, meant for bodyweight aerobics, not loaded barbell work, shifted. In an instant, his foot slipped. The bar, no longer supported, dropped down the rails. With the safety stops set to floor level, there was nothing to catch it. The full weight forced his neck to the ground. Less than 2 meters away, Dr. TRAGICALLY saw the accident unfold. He and his training partner rushed to help, but the damage was immediate and severe. Dr. Damian Laba, an anesthetist at the hospital, recognized the critical nature of the injury and started CPR. Despite their efforts, Mohammed died at the scene. Police reviewed the gym's CCTV footage. The sequence was clear. A single human error, compounded by a leftover equipment setting and an unstable platform, had removed every margin for safety. The Smith machine itself hadn't malfunctioned. Its safety system worked exactly as set, but in the wrong position, it offered no protection. The coroner ruled the death an accident. UEA Sports Park responded by adding new warnings about safety stop adjustment. A small but vital change meant to prevent the same chain of mistakes from happening again. Norfolk's coroner delivered the verdict with clarity. Mohammed Faraj's death was an accident, the result of a simple but fatal oversight. The Smith machine's safety stops, designed to catch a falling bar, had been left at the very lowest setting, out of sight, out of mind. The user before him had needed them that way for hip thrusts. No one warned Mohammed to check. No sign reminded him to adjust the stops. In the aftermath, the venue's leadership faced hard questions. Benjamin Price, head of sports operations at UEA Sports Park, explained that warning labels about safety, stop positioning were installed immediately after the incident. The gym also reviewed its induction process, emphasizing the need for every user to understand how to set the machine's safeties for each exercise. Police and the health and safety executive both investigated, examining CCTV footage and staff protocols. They found no mechanical fault. The equipment worked as intended. Its only failure was human. The inquest heard from witnesses and doctors who responded within seconds, but the outcome was unchanged. Mohammed's family and fellow students mourned a promising life cut short, while the university community absorbed the lesson. Today, every Smith machine at Sports Park carries a bold warning: always set the stops before you lift. The coroner's ruling and the gym's changes stand as reminders that even the most advanced equipment is only as safe as its last user left it. One overlooked setting, one unstable surface, and a routine exercise became irreversible. For every gym-goer, the message is clear. Safety depends on vigilance, yours and the person before you. Across 5 countries and 8 years, every case in this documentary involved victims aged just 15 to 33, all using equipment considered routine. Official investigations, from Queensland's Workplace Health and Safety to a UK coroner's court, documented that each death resulted not from extreme misbehavior, but from a moment's lapse, equipment oversight, or the physical limits of human response. Despite gym policies and spotters, fatal outcomes still occurred in seconds, sometimes with safety stops left unadjusted, sometimes with loads even experienced lifters could not control. While venues have since added warnings and reviewed protocols, full prevention remains elusive. Not every detail, such as precise times pinned or all contributing factors, is publicly available. What stands clear is that in every case, ordinary environments turned deadly through a chain of small errors or the simple force of gravity. These stories, drawn from news reports, inquest documents, and official tributes, show that gym safety depends on constant vigilance, proper equipment setup, and respect for the weight, regardless of age, skill, or experience.